Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks. A podcast that gives you nothing for your money but a memory. It's Sif Pop. Welcome to Sif Pop Weekly. Streaming live most weekends are available to download later in your podcast feed. Unless, of course, you're a patron, because patrons get those perks. I'm your host, Aaron Dicer, and each week we'll chat about movies, television, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds. And please welcome our guest this week. I'm not sure if she's a prim, starchy English schoolgirl, but I do know she's a swooning movie picture fan. It's Christy Puchko.
Hello.
Welcome, Christy.
Hi.
It's good to have you here. Christy is a freelance film critic from New York City. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you may have seen her published in on Vanity Fair, IGN, Pajiba, and more. And she's also a fellow member of the Critics' Choice Association, which is where we have met.
That's right.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you on, Christy. The first time we met was about a year ago. I believe was it Irishman? Was that
it
the
was
first
the
time?
Irishman.
Yeah. I think that was the first time we met. That was a fun week. Of all the things quarantine, has taken from, kind of the day to day. That is, those kind of movie awards things is one I'm excited maybe next year to have back. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get through this thing together.
Yeah.
And do that again. But tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and you'll have a chance to, kind of promote people to, whatever you want towards the end as well. But yeah, how did you become a movie critic? How did you fall in love with movies? What's your story?
Well, when I was little, I was fixated on movies really early, like a lot of kids are. I just would stare at them and was super into them. But because of Jim Henson, I was aware that it was a fantasy someone had built into a real thing, because he would do these behind the scenes specials. And I remember there was one explicitly where he was like, people ask how we can make the Muppets pick up things. And I thought it was so cool that he would talk about the Muppets like they were people, but also then show you behind the scenes. And they were showing how here's Gonzo walking across the screen and then picking up a telephone. Right. And they would cut. And he's like, if you notice the cut, and he kept saying the word cut, but I was like a child and I didn't know the terminology. So I was like, what are they talking about? And then eventually I realized that the camera was in a different position. So there was a cut. And I thought that was so cool. And then when I would watch movies, my parents were really young when they had me, they were in their early 20s. So they were still excitable young adults who, didn't want to watch kids stuff all the time. So the way we kind of got around the fact that my dad watched movies I probably shouldn't have been watching as early as I was watching them was that he would explain to me but this isn't real and this is this. And we watched Batman from '89 and I was terrified because Jack Nicholson's the Joker is very upsetting. It seemed enormous and deranged and I was also really into Michael Keaton, which if anyone here is familiar with my work, I really love Michael Keaton. But my dad explained this is an actor, and he found a magazine and showed me this is what he looks like, and this is all pretend, they put on makeup, and I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So when I was little, I wanted to I was I'm gonna make movies, and of course me and my friends would make VHS movies and whatever. And then I got really into studying movies, and I to the point where I created my own independent study in high school about film, which was basically an art teacher being I don't know, read. I mean, it was really well intentioned, but nobody at the school was equipped for that. So it was just basically an art teacher who was she's taken every class in art. I don't know what to do with her. So it was just me reading books about production in an art room. But yeah, so anyway, I went to college. I was studying production, but I started learning that it didn't make sense. I felt, for me personally, this may be different at different schools or for different people. I felt that taking production classes was actually not helping me very much because, one, I was already doing internships where I was on set and I was doing PA work. So I was learning the things in class that I was learning on the set. And two, being a petite woman in my film school meant that the dudes kind of teamed up together a lot. And then they're well, I mean, she's not going to want to be a gaffer. She's not going to want to do boom. And I was I wanted to do it all because I wanted to learn it all. So it got kind of frustrating on that end. And then I was debating what to do about that. And then I took a film studies course that just cracked my brain open. And all of a sudden, it was if movies existed on different levels now, because it wasn't just like, this is how they make a movie, isn't this neat? Like then it was like, here's what theory is, and here's how like audience approach matters, and like all of a sudden I was like, it was like I realized it wasn't 2D, that if you look behind it there's like a hall of mirrors you can wander down, and I was very excited about that. So I switched to studies. But I still thought I was going to work in production. And when I graduated, I got into post-production. I worked as a video assistant editor. I worked on commercials and TV and movies. And then the housing market, whatever, crashed.
Oh,
and,
yeah. No, I was there. I remember.
Yeah. And I got downsized along with a bunch of other people where I worked. And while I was like trying to find freelance gigs to like pay my rent, I met Dan Mecca from the Film Stage, who founded that site with Jordan Raup. And we met at like a networking event. And I was basically being like, does anyone need video editing? Please?
Right. Yeah.
And he was like, you talk about movies in a really exciting way. Have you ever thought about writing about movies? And my response was no. And I had done that all through college. I had written all these studies papers and stuff. And
Sure.
I kind of thought like, I felt like that was my time to do that. It didn't occur to me that that was something I could do for work. And so Dan encouraged me to start writing for them, and I did, but kind of only as like something to keep my brain occupied when I wasn't working, which was a lot because the economy was in terrible condition.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, then it was like, I really started to like it, and I started to realize that it was a better use of all of my film knowledge than what I was doing. And I felt so much less frustrated because post-production is an incredible skill set and an incredible place, and I knew so many amazing people, but a lot of times I was getting handed stuff that was like just pieces that wouldn't fit together, and they're like, well, but you'll fix it in post. And it got really frustrating for me, and I was like, I like this better, where I can kind of sit with my thoughts and then be like, here's the thing. And I started moving toward that, and then I started writing for like Cinema Blend back when Katie Rich was there. And I worked there for several years, and then I moved to Pajiba, and I've written for a bunch of places in between. I've freelanced the entire time. I've never had like a full-time gig where I only write for one site. Yeah. So I've been all over
which
the place.
That is pretty common. Like that is kind of the kind of the world we live in, is to be able to freelance like that. There, a lot of those jobs, with one location have gone away in some ways. So yeah.
Yeah, there's like a lot of misunderstanding because I write a lot for Pajiba, and I am a film editor there, and I am their chief film critic, but that's not my full-time gig. It's
right.
For a lot of sites, that's just not a feasible thing. So
totally.
But I've been doing this job for 10 years. And in that time, I've gone to festivals all over. I've been on film festival juries. I've done set visits. Then I've done kind of just about everything you can do in this field. Like we say film critic, but as you know, it's like you're a film critic, you do junkets, you do right. set visits, you do deep dives on like digging back into like, well, what is this talking about and whatever. So like, yeah, I hesitate to say I do it all because I feel like that's not a very good way of actually explaining what you do. But
yeah,
I've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And now it's like I'm in a good space where people kind of know what I'm into. So like I have people come to me and be like, hey, we need somebody to write about horror. We need somebody to write about the feminist perspective on this, or we need somebody to do a deep dive on this particular genre. Like I love doing that stuff. I do a lot of that for like Mel Magazine, which is really fun. So yeah, that's what I do.
Evan in the chat says Pajiva. No, I believe it's with a B.
It's with a B.
Pajiba.
Pajiba.
Look it up. Yes, exactly.
I would tell you the joke about how it's pronounced, but this is a family show.
I think we all can make the connections, but yes, yeah.
It's a Pajiba. And we're a really terrific site that has a lot of different writers that come at it with a lot of different perspectives. We have a piece right now by Jason Adams about Happy a Season that I'm really happy that we ran. And it's like a deeply personal piece about how he feels like people are judging the girlfriend in the movie a little too harshly. And then he explains from personal experience why he feels that is. And I was just really thrilled with how that turned out. So yeah, that's one of the cool things about being an editor.
I just got around to watching that yesterday, and I am intrigued by that piece. I would love to check that out. So I may go seek that out. It is great to have you here. Like many people who've come on before, you kind of share the same things that we hear over and over again, because if you're anything like me, it is the question you get a lot. Like, how did you get this job? Like, it seems so fun. Like, how did you get there? And time again, people are like, There's a lot of right place, right time. That's just going to be the way it is with anything. But there is also a lot of taking advantage of when that right place, right time hits, and understanding what your skill set is, and just kind of doing
and I mean,
it.
there's also a lot of like, obviously I leave out the things of all the other stuff I tried that went nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, when it was like, video production is, like all the budgets have been slashed everywhere, and realistically I'm not going to be able to make a living doing this for at least several years. Like, I had to pivot and figure out other stuff to do, and I tried other stuff, but like,
Sure.
I had a knack for this. And after I had been kind of doing it for a little bit, I started emailing people and being like, can I get a job with you? And like, you make connections that way. And, it's just a steady process of talking with other people and networking. And I like the term networking. I feel like when I started networking, I didn't have a good understanding of what that meant.
Sure.
I thought it meant like trying to sell yourself and being like, this is me and this is what I do. That's great. And it's like, that's actually really exhausting. And when people feel like you're talking to them just so that you can get something from them, they don't want to talk to you.
Yes.
So I realized I started getting a lot more work when I was just talking to people about movies and stuff that I liked. And I wasn't focused so much on like being like, they need to know why you're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's been my experience in every career path I've had that when you kind of let loose of that thing, that drive that's like, I want something from you, and you gain the idea of, look at these amazing people that have the same interests as I do, and now I have a natural curiosity about them. Like, what do they love? That is what networking really is just the idea of finding a friend group in many ways. Like, I'm a big time introvert, honestly. Like, I'm a performer, so people think that's weird. Like, I like being in front of the camera. I like performing on stage, whatever. But as far as like recharging, I do it alone. Like, when I'm with groups of people, my energy gets withdrawn. But when I'm with the right groups of people, I can relax into it in a way because I know there's like common interests and those kind of things. That's networking for me. That's how you and I met, like that's how totally. I met so many people in the Critics' Choice Association, is just the ability to hang out at a meal table and just say, hey, what movies do you love? Who are you? Like that's really how it starts.
Because we all love movies, you have an immediate shorthand. It's like you speak the same language already. So then from there, it's just, it's just talking movies.
Well, I'm excited to talk movies, Christy. We've got a couple good ones this week to chat about, at least. I won't, say whether or not we think they're good ones. We'll get to that here in a second. We're going to talk about Mank. We're going to talk about Sound of Metal on Amazon. Mank's on Netflix. Sound of Metal is on Amazon. Both are out now, streaming now, that you can check out. We're also going to do best ever Gary Oldman movies for our best ever challenge. And then we'll, of course, have a buried treasure as well. Before we get into our first review, though, there was news this week that was big enough that I feel like we should at least touch on it. And, Christy, I'd love to get your opinion on it. I'm kind of putting you on the spot because we didn't talk about the fact that we'd be talking about this. But here's how I'll form the question, maybe to get us into it. When they look back at the shift from, movie theaters to streaming, or the combination of the two, or just kind of how technology changed how we interact with movies, will this be the Rubicon? Will this, the Warner Brothers announcement, is that the one film historians are going to look back on and go, that was the moment, that was the Rubicon? Or will they look at something else, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think not necessarily this moment. I think the pandemic is going to change what movie theaters are forever. Sure. Because it's not just like for those that don't know what happened, Warner Brothers essentially was like, we're going to release our entire 2021 slate in theaters and on HBO Max. So the idea being that like, you don't have to go to theaters to see their entire slate. You just need to subscribe to HBO Max,
right? Which
per month is less than the cost of a ticket in New York.
Right.
So like, I mean, it's a really smart idea for their HBO Max subscribe. Like, to basically, people are going to be like, oh yeah. Like, I described it to someone. I was like, basically every month it's like Game of Thrones just hit HBO. Like, you may not subscribe to HBO year round, but you will for the month or two that Game of Thrones was on, because that's what I did. And now, like, every month there's a reason to subscribe. So people will just subscribe. And I think that makes sense. But what's scary is that it doesn't show a lot of faith in movie theaters getting back to where they were even next year,
right?
Which is terrifying and making theater owners furious, because they're having a hard enough time. Like, some theaters are open, but they are only open at limited capacity. In New York City, they are still not open. I cannot see a movie in New York City. And I'm lucky because I live in New York City. Like, movie theaters will survive here. There will always be something because New York is a deeply dedicated to culture city. But when I lived in Pennsylvania for my entire childhood, we had 2 theaters, which was really lucky because there were definitely towns that had like a theater. But one of them literally only had 2 cinemas. And they got like independent and foreign films, but they got them like 3 months later than everybody else. So I constantly felt like I was playing catch up, and like constantly felt like by the time I got to see something, no one else was talking about it. And this is also early days of the internet. So it's not like we had like film Twitter to like get excited about it. It was literally like me going to chat rooms and being like, hey guys, did anybody else watch Smoke Signals? And then just getting silence. Like, so that makes me nervous because I mean, I think the accessibility is a really cool thing, which is one thing people talk about, like, you know, but then all these movies can be seen anywhere. And I think that's cool. But what I think is really scary about it is I think it is going to make it harder for theaters to reopen because now there's not even necessarily the promise of these big event films that got people to go to theaters to begin with. And like, I do think that will change the way we look at theaters. I don't think movie theaters are going to go away, but to survive, because I mean, I'm not going to like give a whole history lesson on this, but if you look back at film history, like there has been a literal ongoing conversation about movie theaters are dead since television happened.
Right.
I mean, honestly, even since like talking pictures happened, because some people were like, I mean, what is the magic of cinema if people can talk? And like, it may sound insane and alarmist, but it's also that you were taking a medium that was new and that people were starting to understand and that had an audience. And then you said, we're going to completely change everything about it. And every time there has been a response of going like, this is the end of cinema. So I think that we're seeing that now where people are like, this is the end. And like, I'll be honest, my first thought was like, oh no, like, I do think it's going to make it way harder on theaters. I do think you're going to see a lot more closings because of this news, because theater owners and like stockholders and stuff are not going to be able to sell the idea that we're going to all be back in theaters by April. Like Warner Brothers was just like, nope. And like maybe theaters will reopen in 2021 and it won't be a big scary thing. I mean, you know, like New Zealand and Australia and stuff get to do that. But I think it's a really scary news. I think we're going to see things shift, but I don't know what that means. I really have a hard time understanding. I think one thing you'll see is theaters will get a lot smaller because then they won't need as much overhead. They won't need to fill as many seats to like make up for like the amount of space they take up. But that might also be because I come from New York City where rental space is insanely expensive. Yeah. As you are seeing most of my apartment right now.
Right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I've kind of stuck all along with kind of what my feelings have been since really the pandemic hit in March. We had conversations about this in March and April, that this is going to speed up the inevitable, right? Like there was an inevitable shifting of what movies were going to mean to people as a theater experience. And long term, my guess has always been that is going to be that it will move much more towards the eventized movie-going experience, as it already has been even before this pandemic, that, you know, it's all about the Avengers and you know, DC.
And I mean, even back when 3D became a thing again and they started making everything 3D, like I used to have to specifically see movies in 3D because then we would write about whether it was worth the extra $5 to see it in 3D. Like, and I mean, 3D is an old gimmick that they renewed. They also tried to renew, like, I mean, the smell-o-vision was a thing, and they tried to kind of redo that with like 4D, which I've done. Which
with like the motion and stuff. And,
I came away with bruises from 4D, but it did make Geostorm way more entertaining. But like that's the thing. I think that theaters have been trying to figure out what to do. I think it's not just event cinema though. I think the event then becomes the joy of seeing it with other people, which becomes
totally,
which is now a rarity. But it's weird because like I thought when I heard that news, I thought surely there are a lot of people who like me are like, oh no, am I ever going to get to be in a theater with a bunch of people experiencing something in that communal atmosphere again? And so I tweeted about it and I was like, just tell me a great experience you had in a communal environment in a theater. And like at first it was like people actually responding with like stories and it was really cool. And then the way things go on Twitter where it kept going and people just started ignoring the prompt and like, it just got really weird. And like some people started just talking about the one time they went to a movie and nobody else was there and it was awesome. And I'm like, I mean, But a lot
I
of us can do
understand
that
what your question on
now.
Twitter was, but I have this thing I want to say,
Right.
so I'm
Yeah,
going to
that
say it
happens a
on.
lot. And then
Yeah.
people were just talking about like fights they had seen break out in theaters, and I was like, I feel like we've lost the thread here.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that made me worried because I thought to me, the theater is a holy space. Like it is my church. I take it like I go there and I'm so excited to be there. I'm so excited to be there with other people who are excited to be there. Like film festivals for me are my favorite time. I like love getting to see everyone and talk to everyone. And it's just, because it's not just about the movies, it's about us experiencing them together. And I love all that. And I genuinely don't know when we're going to get back to that. And like, especially if theaters start closing, it's going to be way harder to have film festivals. So like, it was weird to me to watch people on Twitter go from being like, yeah, seeing movies together to being like, I really prefer seeing them alone. I was like, you can do that now. Why is that so special? I am doing that all the time right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
To borrow your church analogy, I think we're going to end up with a lot less intimate worship services and a lot more mega churches.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where I really believe, also because of the legislation that has been pulled back recently, that the studios, will own their theaters to be able to do events at. Disney is going to own theater places where
Netflix already does, because the Paramount laws don't actually apply to Netflix or Disney for that matter, because it's in a wonderful bit of hilarity. The legislation actually names specific studios. So if you aren't in those studios, you could technically buy a theater, which Netflix has been doing. And that's been controversial because people are like, on one hand, Netflix is the death of cinema. On the other hand, Netflix bought theaters in New York before the pandemic and kept them running. And they only played Netflix movies, but that was also really cool because then you could go see Netflix movies in a beautiful theater.
I think you're right. I think there will always be a place, even for those intimate movie experiences that you just want to see something with other people on a big screen. But I think it will shift to be a much more of a minority of what we're experiencing in the movie going world. Kind of like, stage, right? Like stage performances were everything. And now, of course, it's, New York City where you are. You can go see pretty much anything on Broadway and it's amazing.
Well, not until May of next year, at least.
Well, I mean in a perfect world, in a post-pandemic world.
Thing. It's like, it's really bizarre being in New York right now because so much of what we do, we just can't. And like, I'm not opposed to that because I feel like we need to do whatever we need to do to get the virus under lock. And like me being disappointed that I can't go to the movies is not the same thing as me being like, I should be allowed to go to movies. Like, I'm actually fine with it. Send me screening links. It's fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a really strange thing because it's like Broadway is just empty. And like, that's a place where like, we have not just like theaters where people go see stage shows, but we also have like huge movie theaters there. And it's just really bizarre. I don't know. Someone's mentioning the Alamo in the chat. And like, literally like 2 weeks before I think everything shut down, I was hosting a screening of Cats at the Alamo, a specifically Rowdy screening. And it was one of the best experiences I've had in movies because it was people who were like appreciating Cats on a level of like, I know this is insane. I'm into it. And like, that was so fun. Like I wrote about that for Pajiba and it was just such a joy to watch that movie. And I had seen it before because I saw it at the critic screening where everyone was like, what's happening?
What is this?
Right. Yeah. But like, that's kind of the amazing thing. Cause like in that movie, one, it is so out there that your brain the whole time is going, are we okay? Is everyone seeing Judy?
That's right. Did they pump something into this theater? Like, are we all tripping the same here? Like,
right. Like you're like, what's happening? But then additionally, that other people are having that experience with you. It's I don't know. It's like all the walls come down. Like, it's just a very, I miss that so much. So like, I don't know, man. I don't know I feel like places like the Alamo might be able to sustain because their model was always about targeting specific groups and like playing to like, they've always done revival stuff. And like, I think places like that'll be okay. But like, I feel like places like AMC and stuff, you're going to see those places shutter and then maybe someone will replace them. Maybe those places will be remodeled to be smaller.
Right. Yeah.
But like, it's hard to imagine like in New York, there are 2 movie theaters across the street from each other at 42nd Street. And one of them is, I think, 4 stories tall, and the other one's like 5 stories tall. Like, they're enormous towers to go see movies, and like outside there's just a huge list of movies that you could go see. Like, I don't know that we're going to see those reopen. I don't know that it's ever going to make sense.
In fact, I think, and I think we will see I'm going to say de-evolution, but that's not really the right word to say. It's just a change. It's just a reverse. I think we will see a reversal from the multiplex back to the, big one screen. Like especially if it becomes eventized, it's going to be much more profitable to have one giant screen that you can sit, 1,000 people in front of, as opposed to 20 screens that are all showing different things. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it moves backwards, like if it reverses and goes back to kind of the movie house, kind of idea.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting no matter what happens. Thank you for off the cuff chatting about that with me. It just it seemed like very kind of
my brain all week has just been like with that, so I'm not sure how clear any of that was.
No, I think we're all like that, and I think that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it does feel like it's an important moment. Whether we look back on it and go, that's the moment, or we look back and we go, Trolls World Tour is the moment. I don't know, but like we're going to look back around this time and really see how it, kind of sped things up. So yeah, thanks for that chat. Let's get into it. Let's take a look and review Mank. 1930s Hollywood is reevaluated through the eyes of scathing wit and alcoholic screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz as he races to finish Citizen Kane. Gary Oldman starring in this one. And then you've got Amanda Seyfried in it as well. And this is about the writing of Citizen Kane. And I guess I will start off here and just say, this is a movie I thought was about something, and then I watched it and realized I was way off base. Like, I think that's important to say because I think it impacted my viewing of the movie the first time through. I have watched it twice now. Because I was expecting like the battle of, Wells versus Mank and who authored this thing and, that, like that biopic energy and that kind of thing. And it's really more contemplative than that. And I think that's kind of important to kind of throw out there at the beginning. Christy, we start off by giving it a rating in one of 5 categories: liked it, loved it, disliked it, hated it, or it was just okay. And I'm curious, what would you say about Mank? Did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
I'm going to go just okay.
Okay. All right. I land in the firmly liked it category. Not quite loved it. But especially that second time through, I think I'm safe in saying I liked it. Why don't you kick us off? What are some of your general thoughts on why you came out thinking it was just okay?
Well, I like Citizen Kane. I like a lot of classic movies. I think it's interesting the way the film interacts with Kane, where the movie assumes that you've seen Citizen Kane. If you watch Mank without having seen Citizen Kane, it'd basically be like logging onto Twitter and you see everyone's yelling about something and you're like sort of getting what they're yelling about.
Right.
But not
yeah.
Like, I can't imagine watching Mank and having it make sense if you haven't actually seen Citizen Kane. And then beyond that, I don't know if it would make sense if you don't already know the history a little bit of the making, because like when I saw Citizen Kane, it was in college and we saw it with the context of this was a movie they were making to criticize William Randolph Hearst. They denied it, but they also were like, but there was also stories about like, in particular, Orson Welles, like going after him in like elevators and stuff. Like, so, that all feeds into when I watched Citizen Kane and what Citizen Kane is to me. And it's like, I walk into Mank with all that context. If you don't have all that context, I don't know how much sense this movie would make from a plot perspective. But beyond that, I like how the movie is a pastiche of not just Citizen Kane, but that kind of era. The characters talk like the characters from classic Hollywood cinema. There's a lot of this kind of talking really fast and rapid dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
Like, as I said in the pre-show, super into Turner Classic Movies. So all that, my jam. And like, also you can understand why literally everyone signed on to this movie, because you're like, oh, I get to like do that voice that like I grew up with. Yes, thank you. But I feel like the story feels really emotionally hollow to me because the way they decide to ground it is around the character of Herman Mankiewicz, who is like religiously aloof. And the movie is supposed to be about effectively him learning to care and him learning that like why that's actually a damaging way to interact with stuff. but I feel like it doesn't really click in a place. And so the whole movie feels like it's at a remove. And I like enjoyed looking at it. I enjoyed watching it. But when it was over, I didn't really feel anything.
Yeah, the things I picked up on the second, just to kind of bounce off of what you were saying, the things I picked up on the second time through, especially, were kind of the layers of, you know, what's going on with Mankiewicz is also in some ways, you know, going on with Fincher, is also in some ways going on with Wells. Like, you know, they're all kind of echoes of each other in a lot of those ways. They're direct echoes of Citizen Kane in the movie. You know, I think there's, you know, famously a glass he drops out of his hand in the same way, you know, that the snow globe drops out of the hand. And there's that kind of, you know, wink stuff that's going on. So as far as like coming to the end of it and feeling like it meant something or that the story had an impact on me, that's kind of where I landed on that. Now, that's not extremely fulfilling. That is not how I personally like the most to experience a movie. I am a sucker for like the big story with the big meaning and the deep metaphors, and like that stuff tickles my brain in really fun ways. And this is really just more of a Fincher doing Fincher. He's doing like his technical stuff, which I really do like. That probably even more than anything else. That's the reason I end up saying I liked it, and the reason I would watch it twice is he, as somebody who is a Wells fan, you know, for Citizen Kane in some of the movie stuff that he did in that, but also very much a Hitchcock fan in the way he would use the camera and invent new ways of seeing, you know, the screen. Fincher has really taken that on. In fact, in some movies, a little bit too much. You know, I think of Panic Room, which I rewatched this weekend, is just all about like, look at what the camera can do. I can go through the lid of a coffee pot, and now I'm going right through the wall, and now. And, you know, there is an element of that.
That's a complaint people had about Fight Club, too. They felt that cinematography-wise, it was too clever.
Right. Yeah. The term I'm hearing these days is athletic. He's a very athletic director. You know, he really goes after it.
I guess that's a good, like, I get what that means, but I also hate that as like, that's such a condescending term.
I know. That's how I've heard it is condescending too. So, but that stuff appeals to me. Like, that's one of the reasons I like watching, you know, Vince Gilligan stuff on TV, like Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, is he also does a lot of that really fun stuff with the camera. And so, you know, it is a reason I come away, I think, enjoying this movie overall. So what did you think about the...
That's the thing. It's like, I like it, but I like it for the reasons I like Citizen Kane. Like, I don't know that I like Mank on its own. I think there's a coldness to it. And I think Fincher is a pretty cold director. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think that's inherently a criticism of him. But I think there are scenarios in which that coldness works. Like Zodiac, the coldness makes sense. Because the whole thing is steeped in this sense of dread. And it's almost like you can like feel the cold air on your skin as you watch that movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think it works for like Seven. I think it even works for Fight Club, where like you have characters who are really passionate, but really glib. Like there's a bleakness in there. So I think that stuff makes sense. For Mank, it's weird because the movie almost feels, I mean, the movie is it's essentially a fan fiction, first off, which is fine. I don't need movies that are like based on real events to be real. I like, you know, we have history books for that, but like, man, like the liberties they choose to take. And then I'm like, you could have at least like zhuzhed it with just a bit of emotion, but instead it's like, I don't know. It's Gary Oldman feeling very comfortably in his niche as like, I like, it's just kind of like charisma and a bit of madness and like smartest guy in the room. And I get all that, but like, it's, it just feels hollow for all these little things. Like, I really hate how they write basically almost every female character in this movie.
Ooh, tell me about it.
Well, like, for instance, his wife, who is played by Tuppence Middleton, who like could be Gary Oldman's daughter. It's just weird. She only shows up to like either support him or nag him. And like, why is she even in the movie then? There are enough people giving him a hard time. You don't need to have the wife that like, it's just so frustrating. She literally just shows up and she's like, Mank. And I'm like, man, what a waste of a character. And then by contrast, it seems she exists so that it makes us like the Amanda Seyfried character better. Right. And I saw some people online. I think Amanda Seyfried is very good in the movie, but like people online, I saw someone being like, "Oh, well now the dumb blonde character is dead. Amanda Seyfried killed it." And I understand that like Twitter is a place of hyperbole, but it also kind of annoyed me because I feel like it falls into that trap of acting like this is the first time we ever took a character that you thought was going to be a dumb blonde, but then she's got smarts. Like literally, Born Yesterday did that in 1950. Let's all settle down.
Right.
And I feel like this movie owes a lot to Judy Holliday specifically. Like, I don't know a lot about Marion Davies as a person. I know a lot about what other people said about Marion Davies. So,
Right.
like, it's hard to filter that. And I think that Amanda's really interesting and fun in this role. And I think she brings a lot of charisma. But I'm not mistaking enjoying watching Amanda with like having feelings about the movie. Like I still felt
Right.
really numb because it felt again like you were like, Mank has this nag of a wife, but this hot blonde who's also smart gets him. And I was like, oh, okay.
I totally hear what you're saying. I did feel a little more positive towards his wife character than you did. I felt like in many ways she was the only one that was able to ground him authentically. Like he liked the repartee that he had with the Marion Davies character, and that she was kind of up for it and equal to the task and that kind of stuff. But there was a reality to the wife character, and where I would agree is there's not nearly enough of this going on for it to make much of a difference in what the movie is saying and what it's doing. But when she was there, I did have the feeling of, she says something about, your platonic affairs and this and that, and there's just a moment there where you're just like, oh, she's living in the real world. Everybody else here is in this fantasy, say the coolest thing, be the suavest person, and she's like, hey, guess what's happening in the real world, real stuff. And there was that part of it.
I don't know if you're familiar. I think her name is Natalie Walker, but there's this like comedian / singer / actress on Twitter, and she does these videos that are basically like stereotype female characters that are just exist on the side so that the plot can be juicier.
Yeah.
And like she felt like a character like that where she pops up solely. Yeah, she pops up solely to be like, you're doing a good job, Mank, and I approve as your wife that everyone thinks is a bitch. Like we don't need that. And like the thing, there's a whole speech she gets, which I feel like is supposed to justify her existence, but it's essentially saying that she chose to be the battle axe in his life, that she knew that he was a difficult man, but she chose him anyway. And I was like, no, that's exactly, that character exists in all these movies already. We don't need to give her a speech that validates, like, it essentially says it's okay that he's abusive and selfish because she signed on to that. Like,
it's like the much more shallow version of Phantom Thread,
yeah.
Like,
that's the thing. It's like another one of those stories that was like, well, he was a great man, so it's okay that he was like, and I mean, he makes an absolute jerk of himself over and over and over again in the movie, but like, because Sarah says it's okay, we're supposed to be okay with it. And I get very frustrated. Like, I feel, especially because I think like the first character we see in the movie that is a woman, I might be wrong, is literally topless, except that she's wearing silvery pasties at a typewriter. Like,
yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, it just, and it's like every character in this is a sketch. So like, I'm not necessarily saying like only the female characters are written to be stereotypes. Like Louis B. Mayer is mercilessly written to be just a crony. Like there's not a lot of depth to a lot of the characters. And like Thalberg is written to be very manipulative. And there's not, it is characterizing these people. They are all caricatures in like the literalist sense. So I'm not saying this is like an aggressively like misogynistic movie, any more than like a movie from that time that was like, also that was abroad. But it is disappointing that if the whole arc about Mank is that people keep asking him about how he wrote Marion into the script and he keeps being like, it's not her, it's not her, it's not her. I'm like, I mean, okay. But also like, he doesn't care that everyone else thinks it's her. Like, it's literally, they're supposed to be friends. And the emotional tension is supposed to come not from him being afraid of William Hearst, which is a choice because William Hearst is like literally one of the most powerful people in America at that point. But okay. But instead, the emotional tension is supposed to be, how is she going to take this? And it's like, we've only ever seen them interact in moments where she's being very plucky and never really all that down. Like even when she's down, it's still from this like kind of manic pixie dream girl level of down where he can like buck her up by saying something witty. And like their big moment together, I just feel like it doesn't ring true for me or like interesting for me because it's still ultimately that he doesn't want to feel bad about being a selfish person.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it all feels like it's justifying the story I've seen a bunch of times before. And like, I just
And
was like,
you don't think you don't think that it's possible at the end that there's a shift in him realizing that that's who he's been and maybe not who he wants to be? Or am I misreading the character development of that character?
I mean, I maybe, but then also the last thing they give you is this speech where he's kind of justifying all of his behavior again because they won the Oscar.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
No, that's a fair point.
Like,
yeah.
I feel like that's not a spoiler because like people, the
No,
Oscars happened
that's fine.
many years ago. But like it feels like ultimately, I like it's one of those things with stories when you're telling a story about a creative, I want to say person, but creative man. The stories we get like this story again and again, like I know this guy was abusive, but he was super smart and creative. And like, okay, but like it's interesting to me. Like to me, the most interesting part of the movie is involving the Upton Sinclair stuff and about how like it wasn't enough for him to say to his boss, I don't want to partake in this. He basically gave his boss a roadmap about how to do the very thing he didn't think should be done.
Right.
And like, I feel like the movie moves past that in a really precarious way. So like to me, I was like, like I feel like the movie is giving you interesting ideas, but doesn't really let you sink into them because it's so caught up in kind of the style and the verve. And it's like condemning Hollywood, but at the same time being like, but isn't it pretty? And I don't know that it pulls it off. It's trying to have its cake and eat it too. And I don't think it necessarily does that.
I think all of that is fair. I think it pulls it off a little bit more for me than you, it sounds like. And part of it may just be as somebody who, for my entire life, has been so in love with quips and words and wordplay and just like there's such a a bevy of wonderfulness when it comes to the way words are. And I don't know how much of this was his dad's script. I know it's the screenwriter is his dad, right?
Yeah.
I think Jack Fincher.
Dad,
Yeah, David Fincher's dad. And I don't know how much of that was, added on by other people or whatever. Screenplays can be interesting that way. How much is done on the day, improv, whatever. But man, it's really nicely written. I for somebody who loves that stuff, that's probably another reason that every 10 minutes I'm getting, oh, that was smart. I love that stuff.
Great.
Yeah,
totally crackling dialogue, really in tune with the kind of comedic sensibilities of the time, but in a way that feels freshly exciting. I think all the dialogue stuff is great. I think it is a movie that has like a lot of style. It's just that for me, not as much substance, and especially, and I like Gary Oldman. What is he doing in this part? And there's a line in the film where I was like, I don't know anything about Herman Mankiewicz. I was like, maybe he was in this roughly this age. But there's a line in the film where he yells at somebody, he goes, I'm 43. And I was like, hang on a second. And like apparently him and Marion Davies were around the same age.
Yeah.
Like, look, if you're gonna have Gary Oldman to play Mank, who is 43, and then you're gonna cast 35-year-old Amanda Seyfried, like, come on, man. And that's the other thing. Like, all the women around him that are like interested in him remotely are always half his age. But like not in the movie. In the movie, like it's just stuff like that where it's like it was actually disruptive to me at that point. Where I was like, look, I think Gary Oldman's great, but you were having him play. I forget how young he's supposed to like. I forget how old between the two parts of the movie, how many years has passed. It's a little unclear and maybe intentionally so. But like Gary Oldman does not look remotely like he's in his 40s. And then I ended up looking up at Herman Mankiewicz. And here's the thing. I do not care if someone looks like in a movie what they look like in real life. I do not think that is an interesting or important part of capturing a moment in time. However, like Mankiewicz had a baby face. And what that means is that people interacting with him would not be interacting with him as they would with Gary Oldman, who is in his 60s and looks good for being 62, but for 43 looks rough. Like, I just found that kind of vexing. And like, especially because we keep having him put up against these young women. And like, I know that's a Hollywood thing. So maybe there's meant to be a criticism in there, but it just feels, it doesn't feel like it is. It just feels like there's like, this is another thing we like about Hollywood, that we old men get to act like we're going to hook up with Amanda Seyfried even when we're 62.
Yeah, and you counter that with the fact that for years women past a certain age in Hollywood are discarded. You know what I mean? Like in the fact that men can work into their 60s and play, 30s and 40s and
let's let's not forget that it was like 2 years ago we had Jennifer Lawrence playing a 40-year-old in Joy. Like literally Hollywood is like, Gary Oldman can play 40. Also Jennifer Lawrence. Like,
Yeah.
So like that was where like the fun of watching the movie and the fun of the banter and the fun of the characters and stuff, where I start going,
yeah,
because it's like,
if
it's gonna be just surface level, then don't, you know, I don't know. I also feel like Fincher's smarter than that. So maybe there's something I'm missing. I only watched it once, but I got kind of frustrated because it felt very kind of like, I don't know. And it's like, I know that his dad wrote the script, and I know that his dad based the script on the Pauline Kael article that has been like completely debunked by now. So it's like, I get that there's like meant to be a lot of fun, but I feel like it's trying to have all this kind of like rah Hollywood fun with a wink, while also kind of pushing a narrative that does not exist, while also trying to act like it's more sophisticated than it is. And I'm just like I, you know, honestly, it's like if this had come out over the summer instead of award season, I probably wouldn't have been as riled about it. But it's coming out at that time now where my brain is like, you need to see all the best stuff right now, which makes it harder on any movie I'm watching. But like, you know, people are like, oh, we're going to get Mank, and it's David Fincher, and it's Gary Oldman. It's like all these Oscar winners, like this is going to be intense. And I watched it and I was like, I mean, it's fun.
Yeah. Let's finish here with this review. Where would you put it in his kind of filmography? You don't have to be like, you know, laser accuracy, but, you know, would you say it lands somewhere towards the bottom with the way you felt about it, somewhere more towards the middle? Kind of, how are you feeling?
I mean, for me, probably toward the middle. I really like his stuff when it, the crazy thing that I like when he does crime stories. I think Gone Girl is amazing. I think Zodiac is impeccable.
Yes.
And like, I really like Fight Club, which is not a true crime story, but is a story about crime and politics and toxic masculinity and all that stuff. And I like Seven, but like this for me is like, I know The Social Work, I know The Social Network is a great film, but it's also a film that I watched and was like, wow, I feel nothing. And it's like, it just like, it was like,
is it similar to Mank in that way? Is it kind of similar to Mank in that way for you?
I think that there's a lot more investment in trying to understand Mark Zuckerberg in that movie than there is trying to. I feel like the movie, like, I feel like Mank almost takes for granted that we like Mank and therefore are just on this ride with him and like relate to him. But I feel like Mank comes from a very cynical viewpoint, and I don't subscribe to his worldview. So like the assumption that like because he's sassy and because women think he's attractive that I'm immediately supposed to latch onto him, like that didn't click for me. So for me, like, you know, for me it was like The Social Network, like that. To other people will be like, oh, so one of his greatest films ever. And it's like,
right. Fair enough.
I don't think that The Social Network's a bad film, but it's a film that doesn't speak to me personally. And like Mank, there's a lot of things in it I like, but it's because it's so much of it is a pastiche of a time, and like being like, we love these things, but it's acting like, but there is a seedy side. And it's like, we know we also love the seedy side.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, like you know, down to the fact that there's like a joke, the Rosebud joke in this, like there's dirty jokes in the movie, because even that was something that existed at that time that we're still fascinated by, because there's like all this glamour, but then also being like, by the way, shady talk. So I don't know. I like it. I like it as an homage of that age. I like it as like this kind of giddy fanboy criticism of an era, but I don't think it's all that deep. Or it's committing the same sins of the things it's claiming to criticize.
Yeah, I think it's firmly in the middle for me. You know, I have, you know, Benjamin Button and Alien 3 and, you know, some of those down there like many people do. I didn't necessarily love Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I feel like I got it, but it wasn't, you know, great for me. But you talk about Zodiac and Gone Girl and Fight Club and even The Game. I love The Game. You know, yeah, he's hit some home runs, so it's not a surprise that, you know, if it's not a home run, it's going to land, you know, somewhere short of that. But yeah, well, there you go. There are thoughts on Mank. I would give it a slight recommend at least. Christy, who would you say this movie is for? Or who would you recommend it to?
I mean, I think that if you're compelled by the trailer, like you'll be interested in it. I think it's intended for people who are more into classic Hollywood cinema. I saw somebody in the Slack saying, or in the chat saying that they had already watched it and they had not seen it at Citizen Kane and they didn't think it was confusing. So great, cool. Maybe you don't need that as context. But for me, the real joys of the movie were all the references visually and kind of to that. So, I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's, a solid movie. I just don't think it's going to be anywhere near my top 10 for the year.
There you go. There are thoughts on Mank. Let's move on to Sound of Metal. A drummer's life gets turned upside down when he suddenly loses his hearing. No, it's not the Fresh Prince. His life doesn't get turned upside down, just gets turned upside down. Riz Ahmed playing the main role here. Olivia Cook in there as well. What do you think about Sound of Metal? Christy, did you like it, love it, dislike it, hate it, or it was just okay?
I loved it.
Nice! Yay!
Yeah.
I love loving movies.
Yeah, I loved it, even though it basically gave me a panic attack for 2 hours. And it's not like Hereditary or something where it's so scary, intense, or something that it binds you all up. It's like on the surface, yes, it is about a heavy metal drummer who loses his hearing. However, it's ultimately about him having to learn to sit in silence. That's literally about, and sitting in silence means sitting with yourself, means sitting in the moment, means trying to shut off your brain and just existing. And for a certain type of person, that's really hard. And I am that certain type of person. So I related very deeply to those aspects of the story, to the point where there's a scene where he basically is having a panic attack in his own variety. And I was experiencing it and literally was doing this calming method that's supposed to help you help your body be you're okay,
right,
it's okay.
Right.
And I was literally watching the movie and doing that because otherwise I was I'm gonna have to shut this off. I can't. And I had to review it. It wasn't just that I was I want to watch this movie. It was also I have to watch this movie and clearly enough that I can write a review. But yeah, I thought it was really sensational. I think that the way they get you into his mind space is really incredible. Because there's a lot of movies that audio wise submerge you into it. But in this, it's they distort audio. There are points where they get rid of the audio. It's not the entire movie because they also want you to understand what's going on. So you understand things he doesn't necessarily understand because they bring the volume back up for you. But there's a point early on where the audio is distorted, it's muffled. And I realized I was doing that thing where you click your jaw on an airplane or something to try to make your ears pop.
Yeah.
I just kept doing it because my brain is you can't hear what's happening. You need to fix this. And it was I was having very physical responses to it. And that was really wild. And I felt a good way to kind of put you into that spot. And then Riz Ahmed has such a powerful performance that it's it just doesn't let up. It's just a movie that grabs you by the chest or grabs you by your shirt and is we're doing this. And then it doesn't let go. And I just, in movies and in moments that were intense and in moments that were happy, I was just fully invested in Sound of Metal.
And I'll get to my rating here in a second, but I want to address kind of what you're talking about with the not letting up thing, because there are different versions of this, right? You think of something like Uncut Gems. This is a movie that grabs you by the shirt and doesn't let go, but is also messing around with you. It's throwing you all over the place. And, this is a movie that grabs you by the shirt and doesn't let go. And because it wants you to see something, it wants you to know something, it wants you to understand something. And so it's at the same time there's anxiety, there's also contemplation. And that is a crazy tough balance, I would imagine, to put into a story where you're dealing with the levels of anxiety that you're talking about and also dealing with something so deep and meaningful in what it's trying to do. I landed in the heavy liked it category, not quite tipping over into the loved it, but I really did like this movie. If people have listened to my reviews before, I'm very much an active movie lover. I like stories that, go places and do things. And this is not one of those movies that is kinetic in a plot way. It's not a kinetic plot movie, but it is a kinetic emotional movie. And I think it says enough about this movie that even though, I didn't have necessarily the same things that I usually love to engage with, plot-wise, I had enough emotion-wise and performance-wise, definitely, that just kept me right there in the movie, enjoying it, having a good time, which is a weird thing to say about a movie like this, but processing it, thinking about things. And so, yeah, I really did really like it, even though it's probably not typically like right down my wheelhouse as far as the kind of movie I'm going to love. In fact, usually around award season, I have 2 or 3 that other critics just, really, really love. And I'm just like, not my thing, like it's just, I'm kind of a little more populist, as a movie critic. I like some of those bigger things and more kinetic things. But this one kept me. I really did enjoy it. And I think a lot of that does have to do with Riz and his performance in this, which is not only great, but it's also super high level of difficulty, right?
Mhm.
Like to be able to convey what he's conveying is, I like you have, had moments where my ears will clog up. I'll, have wax buildup or something, and I'm like, oh man, I got to get this taken care of, because it shuts down your world, like hollows out your world. And to have overnight what this character is dealing with, to portray that is, I don't know. I found it really, really impressive throughout the movie. I thought he did a really impressive job. What other thoughts, Christy? Did you have?
I also like that. So it sets up in the beginning that he's basically touring around the country in an Airstream. So it's not like he has this like super elegant life. It's like he has a nice little Airstream with his girlfriend, and they go around to kind of dirtbag clubs and play. And like, it's not a glamorous life, but it's one he's really proud of. And him having a history with addiction is like another part of the movie. But what's interesting is it's like he's also really afraid of losing control because of that past. So like you keep watching him. It's really amazing because it's like it's about him not being able to hear people, but it's really about him not, even when he can hear what they're saying, he can't let it in. He can't accept that his life is different now. And it's watching him struggle with that, even as he learns things, even as he finds a community, even as he learns ASL, so he is able to find a way to communicate with people. Like he still just has this idea in his head that I'm going to get back to where I am. And like we as an audience know that is not going to happen. Like enough people have said to him, like, you can't just go back to where you were before. But and it's like that I relate to too, because it's like when you're going through trauma, the lie you tell yourself is I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be, and to you, okay means I'm going to be like I was before. But like, we're never who we were before. You might be okay, but you're not going to be who you were before. And I think the way the story handles that is so amazing. And it's like, there's a really tearful scene in the beginning, like at the end of the first act, where his girlfriend Lou, who's played by Olivia Cooke, and this is one of the best roles she's gotten in years, because she is another person who keeps getting like the dying girlfriend role or like the cool girl, where she exists so that the male main character can have feelings. And I think you can make that argument here because she is another girlfriend character. However, I feel like they give her enough of a story that you feel like she had her own arc. And I actually read that the director had planned to like make a movie that is just her version of what happened.
Oh, interesting.
But at last I heard it couldn't get funded or something. But maybe this movie will do really well, and then we'll get the Lou story. But anyway, him and Lou are saying goodbye because he needs to go to a facility where he can like process this and learn ASL and all this stuff, and they can't do it together. And like their farewell scene is so heart-wrenching because like there's a lot of like anger and pain and grief. It's like it's a moment where he is recognizing that like this chapter might be like this. There is a death in that this moment of his life is done. And like, I think the film is really dogged in its portrayal of those moments. Like, and I think that's why for me, the emotional tension in the movie is so taut. It's not like every moment. It's like, I think your comparison to the Adam Sandler movie is really smart, because in that movie is a very anxiety driven movie, but it's partially because like everything is going on. And 1 second, I need to plug in my charger, but I'm going to get
You're fine. You're absolutely fine. I know the feeling.
But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, yeah, there is something going on here that is, it's more than the anxiety that they put in front of you. And I think a lot of that has to do with, I don't know how to pronounce the actor's last name for sure, but it's Paul Raci or Raki, possibly, plays Joe at the ASL in Community. And he offers the movie a real sense of grounding that I think is is what allows us to understand what the Ruben character is supposed to be making his way towards, and I know personally, through some trauma recently in my own life where, my heart stopped beating, I stopped breathing, my wife saved my life, not to necessarily, spend, several moments, because Krista, I know you're probably hearing about that for the first time, but where I was told after the fact, because I don't remember a lot about it, because, I died there for a second, and also because there were lots of, drugs to bring me back. But I was told, even going into the hospital after they brought me back to life, that I was like, I'm fine, take me home, I'm fine. Like there is this thing that I think we all do that is very much, and it's kind of one of the beautiful things about humanity is kind of that stubborn optimism. I kind of really like it, but at the same time, there has to be an honesty to our experience that this movie is willing to let him have. It's willing to let him have both that stubborn optimism, and then also say, yeah, but you're kind of wrong about this, and to help him find his place there. I really thought it was beautifully traversed in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the trauma response too, that like you need to believe you're going to be okay, or else how do you get through that moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And like, that's the thing. It's like he keeps building toward this idea he has of what he needs to do. And I thought that the way they transcend that is really amazing. And yeah, Paul Raci, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but incredible. There's like a scene between the two of them over a kitchen table. And like, man, I like, part of the thing that drives me crazy about Oscar season is that everybody talks about the big performances, and it's like who Daniel Day-Lewis did up and and like, because like we all think of like the sizzle cut that they put together for the Oscars, where it's like cutting to someone and it's like, I know this, and they're like, you can't handle the truth, and it's like yelling. Like acting is it's not about who did the best performance, it's about who did the biggest performance. And like this is like the total counterexample where like Paul Raci just, the look on his face, and he just has like such an expressive face and the subtlest motions, and like he gives Riz this look, and like my heart couldn't handle it. Like
it was so real. It was so real. Yeah.
And then it's like, then the plot goes somewhere where I really didn't anticipate it to go, because they have absolutely not set up where the third act takes place. And I think that's fantastic, because again, it's like he's on this journey where he doesn't know where he's going to end up. And I feel the way the film puts you in that same position where you're like, oh, okay. And also there's like 3 different instances where he is made an outsider because of sound, either the lack thereof or because he doesn't speak the language. And every time we feel that so intensely with him, in part because Darius Martyr keeps switching back and forth between sound or not. Like there's a scene when he first goes into the deaf community, and they're all signing to each other at dinner, and he doesn't speak sign language. So he can't communicate with anyone. Like he can't. And like, he just came from a hearing world where he couldn't communicate with anyone because he couldn't understand what they were saying. And now he's like on the other side of that, where it's the same experience, but within the deaf community. And I thought that moments like that are they're just really smartly done, and they're really small. And again, it's like Riz is so good because his body in this is so tense in these moments. Like you see it in him, and it's him. Like you can see in him in these tense moments that his character has gone through hard times before, and he is, it's basically fight or flight, right? And he's like ready to fight somebody. He is just, he spends so much of this movie in this pose of like, I will battle for this, but it's like, you can't punch anybody and get your hearing back. And so he just doesn't have the tools to figure out how to deal, and to watch those tools be developed. It's like, I realize this may sound very dull. Like I'm basically being like, it's a movie about therapy, really. But like, that's actually what's really incredible about it, is that Darius Martyr managed to take this moment that are quiet moments, that are these small moments, and they feel so emotionally raw that like, yeah, I spent 2 hours just being like, don't freak out, because it's like that fear of what your future is going to look like if you change, because like maybe what he had wasn't perfect, but he knew how to operate in that, like it. And it's
but then the movie also gives us, a moment on a slide that is so, authentically, foundationally beautiful. You know what I mean? Like it finds a way somehow to do both. And I think it really deserves credit for that. So yeah, no, this is definitely a good one. Maybe a little more contemplative. But if if you're looking for something evocative, if you're looking for an incredible performance, I don't think you're going to go wrong with Sound of Metal. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention about the movie before we head on?
No, I wrote a review for Crooked Marquis. So if you want more on
Nice.
my take on it. You can read it there. But yeah, I think it's a really incredible performance. I think he could be very well a front runner because this movie has enough of a profile that even some of the bigger organizations will think will take notice, and I hope so, because man, it's just a knockout performance. And I think Riz has been doing really good roles for a while now, but like, you know, it's so political about like, I mean, it's it's another side of networking, honestly.
No, you're not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this it's an amazing movie I may never watch again. Like, because it just,
there are those movies. Yeah.
I watched it once and I'm like, I'm good. And I it's imprinted on my soul now. And I hope everybody else.
Do you think it's worth even like a trigger warning kind of thing for people who deal with anxiety? Like, is there, something that you need to be prepared for if you're going to watch this? As someone who anxiety hasn't been a huge part of my life. And so it's not something I identify with. But I want to make sure people know that going into something if they may, need to struggle through it.
I don't know enough about how everyone else has anxiety triggers to say. I would say that if you do suffer from anxiety, be prepared for that. Because to me, the movie never uses the phrase anxiety. But essentially, he's trying to learn mindfulness exercises. And if you suffer from anxiety, mindfulness exercises are a major part of like trying to learn to correct that. So like for me, that was it. It was literally like, I mean, like literally the first time I tried to meditate ever, I had a panic attack. And it's like, that's essentially what he's experiencing because your body, like you've trained your body to not relax like that. And I actually thought that's really incredible. I think that even if it's hard to watch, I would recommend it. There's nothing triggering that I think would actually like harm anyone. Yeah. I don't think. But yeah, I would say that's part of the reason I wrote specifically about that in my review because I don't know what could
sure.
And it was, I don't regret watching it. I'm really glad I watched it, but now it's like, when I think about watching it again, I'm like, oh, I know I'm going to have like a really intense reaction. But it's also, it's an amazing performance. And it's also a performance that I think is ultimately about when you hit a wall in your life and you're like, the only way is through. And it's about the process of getting through. And I thought that was really well told. And like, especially this is his first movie, right? Darius Marber.
I believe so.
He's an editor, but I think this is his directorial debut. It's like co-written by Derek Cianfrance, which like very Blue Valentine vibes in that, like also like, I'm like, this is an amazing movie. I will never watch this again. But it's like this brand of, I think it's because it's so doggedly authentic, even down to like, they cover his body in all these tattoos and like, they're not like cool movie tattoos. They're like, they are tattoos that people that have those kind of tattoos and the kind of people you're like, okay, bud. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Just every time they would show another tattoo, I felt like I knew more about this character, even though it's not like he sits and goes, oh, well, the reason I have a tattoo of Titan Whitey's on my arm is because like, there's never a conversation about it, but you're like,
right.
You get a good feel for who this person is based on all these elements that are brought into it visually and audio, and man, the audio. Yeah, that's one thing I will tell you. If you watch this at home, if you have a great sound system, awesome. If you have headphones, do that. If not, just play it as loud as you feel comfortable playing it, because you really need to experience like sound and loss of sound. Like the first time I've ever in a proper booth, like you may be in a proper booth right now. I'm not, obviously. But when I was in an actual booth that they use for recording studios, it's so quiet in there that my ears started freaking out. Like they started almost ringing.
They don't know how to deal with the silence. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's what I experienced watching this.
It's kind of the point of this whole movie.
Right, exactly. That your ears are just like, wait, what's happening? And like the fact that they managed a sound design that makes you physically feel that way is really amazing. And like that may not hit everyone the same way, but like for me, it so threw me out of my comfort zone that I started I realized I was being triggered. And so I was able to do things and I was fine. I did not like have a full panic attack, but like I was like, oh no, that's what's happening, is like I'm experiencing that. But yeah, and I think that's powerful because I feel like it is a story about this, but it's a story about anybody who is had to kind of fight through something like that, where there is no going back to. You are always going to be this new person now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also, it's like when people are like, oh, well, but it was ultimately a good thing. Like this movie is not saying it was ultimately a good thing he went deaf. Like it's saying like that happened and now what? And I thought that was, it's interesting because like we didn't like discuss in advance of like, hey, let's have like thematically different movies. But like, for me, Mank was like really neat to watch, but emotionally hollow. And like Sound of Metal was like audio wise overwhelming in a really specific way. And like what just grabbed at my heart and my ribcage and shook me a whole bunch was the emotion of it.
Right.
And to the point where, it was it was a fully physical experience.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's definitely recommend. I think obviously for Christy it is as well. So you can check that out on Amazon. Again, it is called Sound of Metal. Before we head on to the best ever challenge, just a reminder, thank you so much to our amazing SIF Pop members. We appreciate you. We love you. We couldn't do what we do without you. If you want to check out how all that works, just go to the Patreon, patreon.com/SiftPop, SIFTPOP. Sports starts at $3 a month. Lots of fun perks there. You can check those out, including a bonus audio podcast every week. And this week, Christy was kind enough to go over her list of shame with us. We played the list of shame game, and boy, oh boy, it's a doozy. You'll want to check that out if you're a SIF Pop member. So, but thank you so much. We really do appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. It's very humbling that you would choose to send a few bucks our way every month. That means a lot. So again, check it out at patreon.com/SiftPop. All right, best ever challenge this week is Gary Oldman movies. We're each going to go from number 5 to number 1, movies that Gary Oldman is in. And again, if you have one that you've got ranked higher than me, just let me know and we'll wait to talk about it till it is at the highest point on one of our lists. If you're in the chat and you want to let us know your favorite Gary Oldman movies, feel free to do so. I'll have some honorable mentions at the end if we don't talk about them. Why don't you kick us off, Christy? What's your number 5 Gary Oldman movie?
My number 5 is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
You know what? This may shock you. I'm going to have to trump you on that. I actually have it higher.
That's exciting. Okay. I was worried. I was like, okay.
That's really cool. Yeah. I have at number 5, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This series of movies just was one of the most pleasant surprises of my movie going over the last decade or so, because I wasn't expecting anything from this trilogy, which I don't even know was originally going to be a trilogy necessarily, but the first one was so good. And I really enjoy these movies. I think all 3 of them stand together really well. I think if I had to pick, I like the final one the best. I always have a hard time remembering which is Rise, which is Dawn, which is, a War. I think War is the last one. But I do enjoy these movies quite a bit. Andy Serkis, of course, is phenomenal in these, and single-handedly has moved the discussion on the idea of a performance-based Academy Award, or some sort of vocal performance, non-visual performance-based Academy Award. I think we'll have one of those within the next decade or so. But yeah, I really enjoy this movie, so I had it at number 5. Any thoughts on the Planet of the Apes movies?
I liked them back when they were people in plastic monkey masks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know.
I Charlton Heston.
Fine, yeah, but I preferred the kind of, I don't know. There was such an ardor in those early ones that they're my faves.
Yeah, you're a big fan of was it Tim Burton that did the?
Yes. I did not like his remake. No. I did see it in theaters opening weekend.
Yeah.
Because I was that girl. But yeah, these are fine. They're just, I don't know. I think it's that this was when the series got it felt that these were serious in a way. The original had a little bit of a wink to it because they kind of had to. And it's like, oh no, now we have the effects. This is very serious. And I was like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, but it's still about talking monkeys. I mean, just so
that's right. That's still what we're doing here, right? Yeah.
What's
your number 4?
My number 4 is Lawless.
Okay, good choice. Talk about it.
No one talks about Lawless anymore. I loved this movie. It's about bootleggers and Jessica Chastain's so good at it. And he's one of the smaller characters in it. So it feels a little bit like a cheek to pick it, but I really love Lawless. I have the soundtrack on my phone to this day because it's so good, but it's it's a really moody movie and everybody's kind of on the same page. And it's not authentic because everything's a little just a little too much. But I like that about it. And that's a very Gary Oldman trait to me, where it's here's where this would be authentic. We're going to go. And I appreciate that about him.
Nice. All right. My number 4 is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. So we can go ahead and talk about it. This is just such a fun movie. It is the side story is one of my favorite movie. I almost said tropes. That's a little negative way to say it, but just, the idea of showing what happened to the side of a story that you know is it's just a beautiful way to experience something. I mean, I love Lion King 1.5 for that reason. Like it's just kind of a fun thing to see. So this is definitely one of my favorite versions of that, with the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern characters kind of having their own story. Plus it's so fun in a clever way, which is always going to tickle my funny bone. You know, there's a meta-ness to it that's really, really good. So what are some of your thoughts, Christy?
I saw Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead as a black box production when I was in high school. Cause again,
nice
theater kid.
Yep.
And then when I realized it was a movie, I was super excited. And like, it's just, it's so good. It's like from 1990. And like, it's just Tom Stoppard's script is so smart. And then what's amazing is like, I was super into Hamlet again, deeply nerdy. And I love the idea though, that like Hamlet is like a straight faced drama. There's like all these big moments. And then Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is deeply funny, but sad and weird. And also the entire movie, like the whole time I watched the movie and like the play when I went to see it, I was like, but I mean, maybe they don't die though. Like, even though I know the title and I know the story and I know where we're going to go, like I got so caught up in their adventure that I was like, maybe not though.
Right.
Yeah. It's just such a terrific performance. And like, it's, man, it's just theater kid manna. It's exactly what you want.
Yeah, totally agree. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Leon the Professional.
You know, that just came up in the chat, so let's get to it. I came to this movie like way late. Like I just saw this a couple years ago for the first time, and I think that had an impact on kind of because I'd heard a bunch about it. And sometimes when you come to something late, it just doesn't hit the same way. And I think that's my experience with this movie. But I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on it and why you love it. And
yeah, it's become problematic on a couple different levels that I don't really want to get into all that right now.
Yeah.
But I saw Leon when I was much younger. I just thought it was such a fun story. I think Jean Reno is so incredible in it, and it takes all these elements of kind of almost like Chaplin-esque humor and puts it into a hitman movie. And then there are more tropes in it that don't work as great. But like Gary Oldman plays a villain who is I mean, it's a very campy performance because it's so over the top. He's like always on, I'm assuming amphetamines. I'm not really hip on drug culture, but it's like you always see him cracking these pills in his teeth and then like being really out there. And it's like, everyone knows the scene where they're like, these like, get me everyone. And they're like, everyone? And he goes, everyone! It's like super intense. But yeah, The Professional is just, it's such a stylish movie. And it's like, a movie that was very influential. Like if you watch other action movies after you've seen The Professional, you're like, oh, they're doing The Professional. Like,
right. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason when you come late to a movie, sometimes it doesn't hit the same is because, you've seen the influence of the movie so much that sometimes you don't give the movie even subconsciously the credit it deserves for, originating some of that stuff. So,
which I will say to people who have not seen Citizen Kane, and they're like, I should watch that before Mank. If you're not impressed by Citizen Kane, maybe read a Wikipedia entry because Citizen Kane did a lot of things that like now are standard, but were not at the time.
Yeah.
And like that was part of the reason it was so, and not even at the time was super impressive, but the part of the reason it's such a big deal in film history is because of the things it set up and like knowing the context helped a little bit. But yeah, I can totally see watching Leon now and being like, this is what people are so crazy about. Like,
I'm glad you mentioned the Citizen Kane thing. We talked about it on this show. I think 2 weeks ago we reviewed Citizen Kane and kind of talked about some of that stuff. But one thing I forgot to mention that I would mention now, if you can find it, I don't even know, certainly in today's internet culture, you'd be able to find it. But Roger Ebert's commentary on Citizen Kane is almost just like required listening on this movie. It's just all those things you want to be educated about and know about how that film changed movies. He goes over in that commentary. It's one of my top favorite commentaries, movie commentaries of all time because of that. So we didn't get a chance to mention that a couple weeks ago. So I'm glad you brought up that stuff because I did want to point people in that direction. So yeah, you have Leon at number 3, right? So we're on to my number 3.
Yeah.
This is where I have The Fifth Element at number 3. Oh, all right. Very nice. Glad to hear it. Excited to talk about it in a bit. What do you got at your number 2 then?
Well, this gives away my number 1. But my number 2 is Bram Stoker's Dracula because I love this movie. I
Do
love
you
it.
really? This movie is so crazy. It's so insane.
When was the last time you've seen it?
Well, I saw it recently.
Because it was like on Shudder like last month.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to review it for another job that I have, where we go through movies and look for, I don't know, you might say sins, like cinema sins, that kind of thing. So
Sure.
we did Dracula. We did this one recently. So it's definitely a fun one to sin, I will tell you that. But yeah, it's kind of, well, no, I'll let you talk about it. You brought it up, so why don't you talk about it?
I love it. I love it
Sure.
so much. So here's the thing. I understand there's a lot about it that's completely bonkers, but that is why I love it. Like you watch the movie and you're like, how did they make this? Why did they make this? Who agreed? And it's so good. But it's like that's kind of the thing. It's so like they just went so out there with it that like I mean, it's perfection. I could never have made this movie. I could never have imagined this movie. And they're like, we're gonna do a gothic vampire tale. But Francis Ford Coppola was like, you know who would be perfect for playing like the English guy who just doesn't realize he's in a vampire's house? Keanu Reeves. And Keanu Reeves was like, cool, I'm not gonna do an English accent. And like, oh bless him. I love it. And they didn't even like change his hair. It's still like that parted bowl
Sure.
cut that we were super into in the 90s. And like every part about this is completely insane. The costumes are amazing looking. And Gary Oldman is like a super sexy Dracula who is also a real weirdo. It's a movie that's like super horny and weird. And like I watch it and I feel like it was a gift. There's like no reason this movie should have been made, and it was, and it makes me so happy every time I watch it. And like I genuinely love it. I genuinely love the sheer bravado. Like this is 100% an example where the studios were like, well, everything Francis does touches like it turns to gold. And like how could Dracula not make money? Which I love is a thing Hollywood still keeps doing. They're like,
right, yeah.
The Universal monsters never fail. But I genuinely love this movie. I don't care that its plot is all kinds of wild. It's just there's something about it that is so intoxicating. And so we were talking about cats earlier, and I feel like I'm revealing way too much about who I am.
No, I'm loving this. This is great.
But like again, it's like you watch this movie and this movie refuses to let you be comfortable in what you think the world is, and it's like, no, this is what we're doing. And one of my favorite things about this is when I got to interview Ben Mendelsohn for the first time, because I've interviewed him a couple of times, we were talking about like influence points for him. And at that point, he had been playing a lot of villains. And I was like, you know, this is before he got cast in Star Wars, but when around they were like rumored to cast him in Star Wars. And I was like, well, like, what are some things that are like very inspirational to you? And he was like, oh, you know what movie I love is Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I was like, yeah, that tracks. That I know we've talked about Gary Oldman for a while. But it was like, of course, Ben Mendelsohn idolizes Gary Oldman. That 100% makes sense. There's a straight line there. But yeah, I love this movie. And every time it's on a streaming service, I'm like, cool, we're watching this. Because it's so special and so weird and beautiful and like, oh man. And I love the boldness that they're like, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like, dude. Like it's just like I think Kenneth Branagh did the same thing with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and then just made a bunch of stuff and also included a sequence where he runs around without a shirt for like no reason. I love it. I love the hubris of it. Like, I mean, I love a big swing. That's where I'm at.
There's even a Universal Monsters joke in Mank, right? To kind of bring it full circle. They kind of talk about it there too. Listen, I am not a movie shamer at all. People love what you love. And this makes me listen, for somebody who sits on here every once in a while and tells people about the amazingness that is Swing Kids. I have no shame. I have no ground to stand on. Yeah, so there you go. Bram Stoker's
for a wild
Dracula.
time, man. Like,
it's true.
It's
true.
I feel very lucky that I was like a child who was going to the movie theaters every week, and like this was the stuff that was playing.
Yeah,
like
it's craziness. It should surprise no one that I have The Dark Knight in my top 2. I have it at number 2. These movies hit me at a perfect time when I wanted superhero movies to be something different, and the progression and evolution of the superhero movie has just been so interesting to watch, because it was one of those things where it started as almost an elevated version of how ridiculous the comics were, right? You think of some of that Batman and Robin stuff, and then so it takes Nolan to come along and be like, yeah, but what if it was a little grittier? What if it was a little darker? What if it was, a little more grounded in that kind of idea, which of course comics have been doing. It's not like that's a new idea into comics. And I should say, I'm not a comic person. I'm not speaking from any kind of expertise. But then to see Marvel be like, yeah, but also the ridiculous stuff is fun, but you can also do the ridiculous in kind of an authentic way. And so it's just been this interesting kind of evolution of what the companies have done. But yeah, The Dark Knight, I think, is of that trilogy the one that I always go back to and just think it's incredible stuff. And Nolan was already Nolan, but also not quite Nolan, if that makes any sense. And
Sure.
so he's really kind of finding his footing in a very populist offering. And yeah, I had a really good time with it. So that's my number 2. Any thoughts on The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight trilogy?
I feel like this is where I lose the room. I
It's fine.
prefer Keaton and Burton for Batman, which if anyone
This
follows
does not
me on Twitter-
surprise me after the conversations we've had the last, that doesn't surprise
I
me
like
at
a
all. I
big
think that's
swing.
valid. Yeah.
But
that
also,
doesn't
it
surprise me at all.
goes back to my Planet of the Apes point, actually, where I always cringe a little when a superhero movie doesn't inherently recognize the ridiculousness of superhero movies.
Sure. Yeah.
And not ashamed, I get it, but at the end of the day, he is a man who is I have billions of dollars and I have a lot of things. I'm going to dress as a bat. And what I appreciated about the Tim Burton movies, I never questioned that decision, because look at Gotham in those movies, especially Batman Returns, which is my personal favorite Batman movie. And now that it's Christmas season, it's a Christmas movie. So do watch Batman Returns. It's on HBO Max and it's my favorite. But yeah, no, I like those movies fine, but I was exciting for me, as you said, to see because we basically went from Spider-Man movies, like Sam Raimi Spider-Man, to these.
Yeah.
And they are literally night and dark, or night and day. I was trying to say darkness and day, and I screwed it up.
Yeah.
That would have been, if this were a review, that would have been a very sharp joke. But yeah, I like them fine. But for me, the Batman movies I go back to are Batman Returns and Batman. Also, Michael Keaton is my favorite Batman, because Michael Keaton is maybe my favorite human on the planet.
Yeah. Michael Keaton was the first famous person I met at my first ever Critics' Choice Awards. And it was so cool until I realized he had the flu. And he came to the awards anyway. He was
I would have gladly gotten his flu. That's where we're at.
I think I even made some stupid joke where I'm like, "Oh, the Birdman flu." Come on, man. Come on.
Oh man, I wish
big goofball.
I got to meet him on the set of Spider-Man, because he was the Vulture, and I was doing a set visit, and I was super excited because I had never gotten to talk to him before.
He was a total sweetheart. He was really nice, and he was just coughing and stuff.
Super smart, and I follow him on Twitter now, and we politically agree on a lot of things, so I just appreciate him. But also, he grew up around the same area of Pennsylvania that I did, so there's also that part of when any and when I say around, 2 hours away, he lived more near Pittsburgh than I did. That's right. But
couple houses down,
It's like how we claim Jeff Goldblum too. You're they were remotely near where I grew up. It counts.
That is totally Jeff Daniels for me. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and Jeff Daniels famously lives in a small town in Michigan still. He'll come to LA to do whatever he does, but we were we're from right near where Jeff Daniels is. Meanwhile, it's an hour and a half north of where we live or whatever. Yeah, no, I totally get that.
Yeah, Michael Keaton still tweets about Pittsburgh politics and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I have opinions too. And it's I have not lived in Pennsylvania since 2001, but I have a lot of thoughts about it.
That's right. Hey, Christy, I think I know your number 1.
Do you?
Yeah, lay it on us.
It is The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
Which, there's a point where you have such an affection for the movie, I don't care if it's good or bad. I don't know. I love it. I think it's a perfect movie. I watched it on HBO. I did not see it in theaters, and it was another one of those movies where the whole time I watched it, my eyes were just this big, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
Like I wanted everything to be real down to like McDonald's waitresses having to wear super complicated objectifying costumes. I
Mhm.
just everything about it, Ruby Rod and like Pablo Laguna, like everything about this movie is amazing. And then in the middle of it is Gary Oldman with this super weird haircut and this like clear plate that no one explains, and he has like a weird desk pet. It is again Luc Besson from The
Mhm.
Professional, and it's just all these details that like tell you about a world. And like again, they must have spent so much money on this weird movie. Like they clearly thought this was going to be a franchise, and then it just that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so what we have is this one super weird adventure that like a bunch of things have come since then and have been, it's like I love it. I love it so much. And it's like it's weird, and I don't know if the plot totally makes sense because I just don't care. I love it so deeply that to me it is perfect.
I think it makes fine sense for a sci-fi movie. I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of here in that regard. But it is definitely a crack cocaine kind of movie where if you're into it, it's like in you, like it's in your skin kind of thing. And I definitely had the same thing. In fact, from the moment Diva Plava Laguna or whatever starts belting out that pop
I could
techno
probably
opera thing,
do that word for word, but very poorly. I don't have her vocals or the.
I was just like, it blew my mind. I was just like, what is this, and how do I live in this world, and how do I watch this movie nonstop for the rest of my life? Yeah. So
yeah. I also want to give a shout out to Sonic Screwdriver, who said the Fifth Element is super green. Yes, thank you. Thank you for making that reference.
Indeed. What'd you think of Valerian? What'd you think of kind of, because that's his first real kind of sci-fi shot at that since then.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. They promoted it. I got to go to like a special advance thing where they were going to show us 8 scenes from Valerian, and they had been promoting it at like, yeah, Valerian's the movie he wanted to make, but he could only make Fifth Element. And I was like, oh man, I like if Fifth Element's amazing, Valerian's going to be the greatest movie of all time. And no, it wasn't.
I know. Yeah, same feelings. Same feelings.
Man. I don't know, and it's also part of the Fifth Element that makes it so fun is like. I really love Bruce Willis because again, I like being raised in the 80s. You see a lot of the Bruce Willis type, and like it, it took his whole shtick of like blue collar tough guy who's like a detective or a cop, and it was like now he's a taxi driver / meat popsicle. And like I loved it. And they're like, we're gonna put him in a crop top that has like a very feminine back to it. And I was like, yes to all of this.
Yeah.
And we're gonna bleach his hair blonde. Sure.
Like, yeah, there's a lot of androgyny to it, right? Like it wasn't something you saw in movies all the time then. Yeah, it was really cool.
And it's not weird. It's like I loved how it gave me like a very familiar version of Bruce Willis, but in a very unfamiliar look. And yeah, everything about that movie was just the coolest to me. And I'm probably gonna, once we're done with this, I'm probably gonna put on The Fifth Element instead of one of the FYC screeners I should probably be watching.
That's right. My number one is The Book of Eli. This movie, for me, there are movies where you get to the end of them and you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I need to watch that again. And there's certainly an element to this movie, story-wise, that is like that for me. But even more than that, the end of this movie does something on a metaphorical level that I wasn't ready for. I just thought this was a typical, kind of journey movie. In many ways it is. And Denzel's being Denzel, and I love when Denzel is Denzel. But then at the end, it just kind of had that 1-2 punch for me. It was like, oh, and then also, oh. And so there was like, when that happens for me, it locks me into a movie in a really interesting way where I'm just kind of like, those are the kind of movie-going experiences that I relish, that I crave, And so this was definitely one of those movies for me. And I know it's hit or miss. I know a lot of people didn't like it. And I get those reasons why they didn't. I recently did a rewatch on it, and it still works for me. It just does. It just still works for me. And I think it's an interesting look at a world where there's a rampant virus pandemic, and it's exactly the kind of uplifting entertainment we need during 2020.
Sounds like escapism. I'm into it.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So that's my number one, is The Book of Eli, and that is very much a me thing. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to express on The Book of Eli?
Only that apparently it's on my list of shame.
Oh, okay.
I haven't
Well,
seen
that's
it.
better than
I don't actually know.
that you hate me for liking it. Which
I mean, we've gone over. I have defended Cats
that's right. You
and
have.
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
That's right.
You follow me on Twitter. You also know that I defend Serenity, not the Firefly one, the Matthew McConaughey one.
Listen. I can almost get to Cats. I cannot join you. I cannot get to Serenity. I don't. That movie is so bad, Christy.
I love it so much. I
so
saw
awful.
it 3 times in theaters. Okay, that's where I'm at.
Wow.
I saw it in a press screening, and I laughed the entire way through it, and no one else did. It was a very lonely experience. And then when I flew to LA for the Critics' Choice Awards, my friend Angie Hahn said, there is a screening of it for press 2 hours after you land. Do you want to go again? And I went, yeah, I do. And I went again
amazing.
almost entirely so I could look at Angie when they do the big reveal of what the twist in that movie was. And I regret nothing. Oh, and then when it came out opening weekend, I took a group of friends who knew I was super into it and knew there was something going on that people kept talking about but didn't know what. And I have a photo, I think it's on my Instagram, where afterwards I made us all get a group photo, and most of them are so mad at me. I don't care. I love it. I love a big swing.
Listen, you love what you love, and we will not hold it against you here. I think it's beautiful.
Not a taste requirement for being a film critic, which is something I appreciate.
Nope. No accounting for taste. Nope, not at all. All right, let's finish up with our buried treasure for the week. What is that one thing in any area of pop culture that you want to make sure people know about? Christy, what do you want to throw out there?
We've been talking a lot about FYC stuff because I know you and I are both in it. We're like all the stuff we're supposed to watch so that we can make educated choices in our votings. I keep telling people, watch Swallow. Swallow is called a horror movie. It is, but it's like it's not a scary horror movie. It's a horror movie in that it deals with things we are afraid of, but it's sort of a dark comedy. Okay. And it is about a woman who eats items that are not edible, including, as you can see in the picture, a safety pin. And that
is a thumbtack. And I want to tell you right now, I may never watch this movie just because of this poster. It is freaking me out. It says swallow and she's holding a thumbtack. That is not okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. I saw it last year at Fantastic Fest. And one thing that was amazing at Fantastic Fest, they gave everybody edible glass to enjoy as we watched the movie.
Nice. Good call.
Was incredible. But it's actually a really interesting story about female empowerment and about how we can kind of get trapped in lives by making one decision, another decision. Someone's asking about domestic violence. It is not about domestic violence. It's a much more sinister version of sexism and misogyny within the home, where she's expected to be this perfect wife and mother, and she doesn't even know if this is anything she wants. And her rebellion is to eat objects like paper clips and dirt and marbles. And it's a very like physically taxing movie because you do watch it and go like, oh my, but it's also like candy colored. It's really beautiful. And what's really fascinating is the writer director of it. This is a real condition. This is an actual condition. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, I don't want to just randomly crap on movies, but it's not like movies that act like having this condition makes you a monster. Instead, it really tries to understand, like, well, why would a sane person do this type of thing? And he actually based it on his grandmother, who had a different ritual of control thing, but she was like in a life that she didn't understand how to process, and she kept rebelling in this way that was actually really harmful to her. But instead of like getting help that helped her, like she had to like sign a doctor, like she went to she was sent to an asylum, and to get out she actually had to sign a promise that she would be a wife and mother that would like keep it together. And like how is that helpful? But he made this really moving, thoughtful film that really understands what it's like to feel trapped. And it's just very moving. And Haley Bennett is the woman on the poster, and she's the lead performance. And it's such an incredible performance because it has to do all these things at once. And I highly, highly recommend this movie. It's one of my favorites of the year. And it's weird enough that you're not going to hear a lot about it. I'm hoping that she becomes a performance dark horse and maybe the screenplay will get something. But like, yeah, it's also been there have been really great movies this year. So I'm not going to begrudge other movies by being like, oh, we're going to hear about these other movies instead. But like Swallow is one that's not going to get as much attention, but it's on Showtime right now. I really think it's sensational. I do not recommend like eating while watching it, unless I guess you have edible glass. That was fun. But yeah, it's I don't think it's a hard to watch movie in that it's not gross. It's not it's to me it was not triggering, even though like I could relate as someone who has anxiety. I can relate to some of the elements in her head where her head is telling her like this is what you need to do, and your body's like, is it now? But I actually think it's a really smart and funny movie. It's like surprisingly funny. Considering the dark terrain of this, and the filmmaker Carlo is just really terrific, and I'm really excited to see what he does next. But yeah, Swallow is one of my favorites of the year, and it's cool because you keep seeing it cropping up in like little places, so it's not going to be a big swing for award season, but I'm hoping we'll see some stuff for it.
I will watch it. I promise you, I will watch it, and I may even report back to you. Okay. It's pica, right? Is that what it's called when people
no pica when they pull hair out and eat it? I forget the specific name for this. Okay. I wrote about it for Sci-Fi, but I wrote about it when the film came out, which I think was like last March. I don't remember off the top of my head the condition, but it is like literally a condition where people are compelled to eat things that are inedible, like couch stuffing and stuff like that.
Okay. Swallow is the name of the movie, and you can check it out on Showtime. My choice for buried treasure this week is The Flight Attendant. I just started watching this. I think there are 5 episodes out now. I think the season is going to be 7 or 8 episodes. I'm not sure. This is Kaley Cuoco, who you may know from The Big Bang Theory. I know her first from, what was the name of that? 8 Simple Rules. There was a sitcom called 8 Simple Rules, and she was the daughter in that. I think it was the first time. She is perfect for this role. And I think that's why I'm recommending this, is she adds a real quirkiness and humor to what is otherwise a pretty dark murder mystery. And so that is a combination that is interesting and exciting to me, because I love the quirk and I also love a good murder mystery. So the conceit is that the man that she sleeps with and ends up waking up next to has been murdered. This is on a layover of a flight that she's a flight attendant on, is now a part of her like mind space, and they're trying to figure out the murder together. So he was murdered. She was there apparently, although blackout drunk from the night before. And so they're trying to figure it out. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's really interesting. I'm really intrigued. I can't wait for the next episode. And so if that is the case, I figure it's doing something right. And so I wanted to let you guys know about it. Again, it's called The Flight Attendant. I believe it's an HBO Max original. So I'm not even sure it's on HBO. I think it's just on HBO Max.
I think you're right.
That you can check that out. Have you checked this out at all, Christy?
I haven't. I heard it's great. I also heard from a friend of mine who got the first 5 episodes as a press screener that she was really frustrated because then she had to stop. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I am currently trying to not watch it until all the episodes are online.
Fair enough.
It'll be like a little treat for myself once I get through all the stuff I'm supposed to watch for work.
There you go. Flight Attendant on HBO Max. You can check it out there. That is my buried treasure for the week. Well, that's going to do it, Christy. Congratulations. We did a podcast together. Amazing work by us. Great job. Thanks so much for joining us today for Sif Pop. It is part of the Studio DNA podcast network. You can find out more about other shows on the network at studiodna.media or by searching Studio DNA in your podcast player. Huge thanks to Phil for producing the show today. Thank you, producer Phil. Thanks to Drew for doing the graphics and some of the other design. Appreciate you. And thank you to Christy for being with us today. Christy, where can people find you? Plug away. What do you want people to go see?
Yeah, I write all over the place. So you can find me daily at pajiba.com, pajiba.com. I have collections of my articles at decadentcriminals.com, which is just like it's spelled, and it's also on my Twitter link. It's basically, since I write everywhere, I try to compile stuff there. So you can find reviews and stuff there. I'm on Twitter at my name, Christy Puchko, KristyPuchko. That's also my Instagram, but my Instagram is mostly where I post pictures of cocktails and embroidery crafting that I do. And it's not necessarily movie related.
It's great though. It's a great follow.
Thank you. And sometimes I post outfits and weird makeup looks. My Vincent Price look I was really proud of, actually. I felt really good about how that turned out. But yeah, and I'm all over the internet, but you can Google me. My name is distinct enough that I'm pretty much the only one that comes up. So
there you go. It's a nice world to live in, right? When you're the only one that has your name, you know, like all the websites are available, all the usernames are available. It's really nice.
I mean, that's the thing. It was part of when I got married, you know, I didn't change my name because I was like, I mean, there's only one.
It works.
Yeah.
Much love and gratitude to our SIF Pop members for giving monthly to make SIF Pop a real thing. Support starts at $3 a month. Comes with some pretty fun perks, including the bonus episodes that we talked about earlier. Lots of ways to connect with us. You can email us feedback@siftpop.com. You can also leave a comment, rate, or review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And finally, if you're having a good time, your movie-loving friends will probably like the show too. So make sure you let them know about it and that listening is much easier than writing a screenplay that actually is director-proof. We will be back next week with who knows what. There's so much out right now. We'll pick a couple movies, talk about them next week, and we'll see you then. Bye. Hang out with the live video just for a second if you guys have any questions for us. I was going to go through the chat. Christy, you did a good job at kind of mentioning some of the chat that popped up. So we've kind of already touched on a bit of it, but I wanted to give them a second in case they had anything they wanted to ask us or say to us, or if they, you know, just wanted to talk a little more Dracula, you know, with you. Because when do you get the chance to talk with somebody who absolutely loves
I mean, it's funny because
Stoker's Dracula?
I say stuff like that on Twitter, and then I find a lot of people who are like, also me. So like to me, I'm like, a lot of people love Dracula.
No. You're absolutely that's the beauty, right? That's the beauty of community, is that you have these things. Like it happened to me when I was like, well, I like Swing Kids, and you were like, I like Swing Kids, and I'm like, well, there you go. So yeah, no, it's fun that way. That's one of the beautiful things.
I do see someone mention Tiptoes, and for the record, yes, I have seen Tiptoes.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yes. I have not seen Tiptoes. So I'm not even sure when was that?
I want to say early 90s. I think I saw Tiptoes because it's in 2000, someone else in 2002. Okay. I know I saw Tiptoes because they talked about it on How Did This Get Made, the podcast. And yeah, and it is a movie where Gary Oldman plays, I believe the terminology is little person, and he literally does it by walking around on his knees. Yeah.
Oh no. Is it like supposed to be serious, or is it supposed to be?
It is a drama. It is a drama. It's been a really long time since I've seen it, but I feel like it was about him and Matthew McConaughey are brothers, but they have like differences. And Peter Dinklage is in it, but like he's like a side character. And he has like
you're kind of blowing my mind. Like that was
the trailer looks like an SNL sketch. Like you're just like, that's not. No one did really though. And like
like immediately what comes to my mind is the awful like Tim Conway stuff, whatever that character was that he used to do on his knees in the Dorf, maybe. I think the name of the character was DORF, and it's just like no. No.
This is like one of those movies that was like an internet thing where people are like, this can't be real.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that's amazing. Well, I'm glad we stuck around even just to talk a little bit about Tiptoes.
Kate Beckinsale and Patricia Arquette are also in Tiptoes. I just looked that up because I was trying to remember. I was like, there's also more people in it that you're like. I appreciate that if anyone's been paying attention, you could tell the sun is setting because I'm facing windows in the room.
That's right. Yeah, it's just gotten consistently darker over the show. This says, I just looked this up on Wikipedia. The film debuted in a 150-minute director's cut at Butnumathon, which I think was the Ain't It Cool News thing that they did in Austin for a long time. That is absolutely incredible. Glad somebody brought that up. All right. Well, appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And for the live broadcast, we love hanging out with you guys every week. And we'll see you next week.